Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sandy Frank's political podcast for a people's movement against the corporate fascist state. I am your host, Sandy Frank, and today we're going to be talking about the uh, election fraud and also the voter suppression, but mainly the election fraud. And we're going to be talking about exactly what we mean by election fraud uh, in the 2016 Democratic primary, and mainly the election fraud and voter suppression committed against Bernie Sanders supporters. Uh, you'll notice that there are very few cases, if any, from Hillary Clinton's camp about suppression and fraud, and we're going to define all these things in a minute. But just to start, to to take the amount of just overwhelming evidence for fraud committed against Bernie Sanders by Clinton and the Democrats compared to no evidence of basically anyone having any problems with trying to vote for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 Democratic primary. So again, just starting off, we have uh, overwhelming evidence, as in case after case after case of uh, Bernie Sanders being cheated, and there's evidence in all of the contests, well, in most of the contests, but just the overwhelming amount of all different types of manipulation and all this against Bernie Sanders. So all of the different lawsuits and cases during the primary have been cataloged by, well, I mean, they've been in a number of all different uh, news sources, especially independent news sources. Of course, the corporate media is trying to tell you that you're crazy for uh, thinking about any of this, especially with the Young Turks and Secular Talk. Kyle Kaczynski, the Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kaczynski have, pretty much flatly denied and lied about how they say that no election fraud, as in tampering with votes, rigging machines, uh, just completely not counting certain votes. I mean, we're going to get into it in a second, but yes, the actual tampering of the voting system from the Democratic Party, or whoever was able to do it. Uh, Kyle and Jank pretty much roundly reject this, and they say the election fraud came mainly from media collusion and media blackout, which is which did happen, of course, in a massive amount, and we're going to talk about that too. But the main part about this video is talking about the actual tampering of the voting machines, the actual hacking of the election. Yeah, there was a hack on our democracy this year, and it was the Democrats, and it wasn't Russia. Uh, Again, and it wasn't Donald Trump. It was the Democratic Party in the 2016 primary. And uh, well, right now we're talking about the primary, but of course this is our voting system. This isn't this wasn't invented with Bernie Sanders, the cheating. This wasn't the first time. This has gone on all throughout history in all different corrupt systems. We see this all the time. But and people like Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kaczynski would like to deny this as well, and try to base uh, you know their revolution on a made up view of the world that our voting system controlled by corporations isn't completely bought, which is ridiculous and not true. As we're about to go over, our election system is completely controlled by the state, which is controlled by the corporations. And Barack Obama pretty much ensured this on his way out of office when he made it so that the government now has complete control over the election system because of the hysteria with Russia, perpetuated by the fascist media. Uh, you'll have, of course, all of these Democrats are crying about Russia right now, which didn't happen. There was no tampering of any sort, just the tampering of Hillary Clinton installing herself as the Democratic nominee and then losing to Donald Trump, and then the people, oh god, these people who still support her, who don't realize their careers are over and that they've been completely discredited. But when we take down the corporate fascist media, we will, they will really understand what the score is. But yeah, so we're gonna go through the entire history of the fraud. So when we talk about the direct evidence for election fraud and voter suppression and various other irregularities, what are we talking about? We're talking about many things, a long list of things. First would be what I just said, or one of them would be voter suppression, as in the evidence we have for the Clinton campaign and Democratic Party sending out false information. It wasn't just a media blackout that the Democratic media was responsible for. They were also responsible for false information, not just a blackout of information, but a complete not just shutting down of polling places, but wrong information about voting, wrong information about registration, wrong information about when you vote, where you vote, how you vote, who can vote, all of this. So we're not just talking about immediate blackout, but we're talking about a misinformation, a propaganda campaign. So we have put on the list of voter suppression, registration tampering, illegal vote purging, evidence of fraudulent or erroneous voting machine tallies, and the estimation of pledged delegates affected, and a lot of other different kinds of cases. But those are some of the major ones: the voting machine tallies, and how all we got the how votes were able to be stolen. So we're gonna focus mainly on fraudulent voting machine tallying. But we want to talk about the other ones a little bit as well. We have voter suppression. We talked about registration tampering, illegal voter purging, and so when I was working for the Bernie Sanders campaign, when I was we were working in Brooklyn, which is where one of the biggest voter purging, 100,000 people were purged off the rolls in Brooklyn, and these were people who were registered Democrat and were all supposedly about to vote for Bernie Sanders. And when I was working and going all over Brooklyn for this, the feeling among most people in Brooklyn was they wanted Bernie Sanders. Uh, I wasn't hearing too much about uh, Hillary Clinton from most of the people. Most of the Hillary Clinton supporters I knew were coming from Manhattan, pretty upscale, rich people in Manhattan. But even in Manhattan, and that part of New York City that would be pro Hillary Clinton, there were still a lot of Bernie Sanders people. And I worked in doing a lot of politics. I had a lot of friends there, and I but my other jobs, but I was also working in Manhattan for, again, the fields of work I were in, very establishment, very pro democratic establishment. A lot of these people still were talking about Bernie. I worked at like ABC, I worked at AMC, I worked at CNN a lot during this time. I worked for a lot of media production areas that are, a lot of these places have a lot of money and they're very pro democratic establishment, and a lot of these people were were in support of Bernie Sanders, uh, and very few for Clinton. Uh, but we all know about the purging in Brooklyn. We 100,000 people just completely off the rolls. And again, this was a closed primary, which is, I mean, this is for something I get a lot of flack for, but I I couldn't even vote for Bernie Sanders. I wasn't purged at all. I was a registered independent. I knew that uh, you had to be a registered Democrat in New York to vote in the primaries, and that really didn't matter to me. Even when I knew I had to change to vote for Bernie. I'm not a registered Democrat. I've never been a registered Democrat. I've always been a registered independent. I like morally I just didn't feel right registering for the registering Democratic when the DNC was responsible for so much war and bloodshed and economic fascism in the world. The Democratic Party has proven itself as a complete useless institution. I just couldn't morally uh, give myself to to register the same way as Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, these murderers, these genocidists, these economic fascists to boot. I just couldn't do it. But you know, the point is that the very idea of a closed primary is purging in itself. I mean, like this party that calls themselves Democratic is just simply ridiculous. That it doesn't want a more voices in its party to voting to figure out what people want. So, I mean, we there just to say how many different types of election fraud and voter suppression there is. Closed primaries are one of them. A great example of what it means, which is trying to silence people's voices in a party that claims to be democratic. The Democratic Party is the least, uh, believes in democracy less than anyone I ever knew. These people are total fascists. They're not democratic in the slightest. But just to try to give a all around view of what we really mean by all of these types of fraud and suppression. So let's just go over it one more time. So the compiled list of everything that happened. We have voter suppression, registration tampering, illegal voter purging, and then evidence of fraudulent or erroneous voting machine tallies, and then estimate of pledged delegates affected. We're not really going to go into that right now. And then media collusion, and this seems like a short list, but it's very apparent that there were a lot of hands in this pot, a lot of ridiculous just so much tampering on the side of Clinton, and then no weird tampering on the side of Bernie Sanders. It's just very suspicious. So we're just gonna look at what the compiled evidence of all of the actual voting fraud kind of looks like. So let's go into that part right now. So we have I'm just gonna read a little bit from Election Justice USA and say primary contest exit poll discrepancies. And right now, so we're talking about evidence of fraudulent or erroneous voting machine tallies. Okay, so primary contest exit poll discrepancies that exceed the margin of error. In 11 of 11 such cases, the discrepancies favored Clinton. Oh, that's interesting. Media outlets have removed the unexpurgated poll numbers for 10 of these 11 cases. According to the USAID, an organization that works to promote oversight of electoral processes, exit polls are powerful analytic tools. A discrepancy between the votes reported by voters and official results may suggest that results have been manipulated, but it does not prove this to be the case. And then we go on to a well-controlled California early voter exit poll, Capital Weekly OpenCA, consisting of 21,000 data points, matched early returns for down ballot races, but was off by give or take 16% for Sanders versus Clinton. With the discrepancy in favor of Clinton. Just give me 1 second, folks. According to the LA County Elections Chief, Dean Logan, early mail-in votes are reported first, strongly suggesting a miscount of mail-in ballots. Our analysis shows that in at least 17 states, precinct size, and the most robust linear predictor of Sanders' vote shares, even when controlling for neighborhood location. In other words, even when controlling for geographical location within the state, a statistical model shows that the larger a precinct, the lower Sanders' vote share. This cannot be explained away as an artifact of smaller precincts being more rural or less ethnically diverse. These results are replicated for New York City. When considering about the Bronx, 10% white, for instance, this pattern was consistent for all 5 boroughs, with the exception of Manhattan, in which Sanders' vote share did not decrease linearly with precinct size. This pattern showed up almost exclusively in a variety of highly racially polarized cities where exit polls missed but was not present, with rare exceptions, in similar states and counties where exit polling was accurate. Multiple studies, including one published recently by graduate students at Stanford University and the University of Tillsburg, show that across all primary states, Clinton performed best in counties with voting machines that don't leave a paper trail, and that this difference is statistically significant. And Chicago's Board of Elections has admitted to one of the authors of the report and to Counterpunch magazine that citizens monitoring the audit were right about irregularities in the process, and that audit numbers didn't match Election Day results. The citizens monitoring groups have inspired in public sworn testimony the numbers were adjusted to force a match. A lawsuit has just been filed to demand an accurate audit of early vote totals in Chicago. Our irregular precinct size pattern showed up weekly in Chicago early balloting and strongly for overall vote in suburban Cook County. Okay, so there is a small look into the problem we have with our election system in terms of our voting machines. So we have all of these discrepancies in the polling and the reported numbers, and all of the times there are these types of discrepancies which are not supposed to be happening. All 11 out of the 11 cases we have the discrepancies helping Hillary Clinton, and no times of it helping Bernie Sanders. Uh, we have yeah, the machines that don't leave a paper trail. All the times those machines that don't leave a paper trail and that we know are extremely unreliable, we know that it helped Hillary Clinton. Well, that's interesting. And even with the exit polling showing that Bernie Sanders should have won those states. So all of this is building up to show us that our election systems are completely fraudulent. Uh, you know, we vote on machines that there's no transparency in. We put our trust into a corporate controlled and state controlled election system with no accountability, and this is the system we get out of it. We get clear discrepancies between actual verifiable polling and the numbers that we are given. Uh, so here is our evidence, and we're gonna look into now some other different types of irregularities that were going on in different contests. So now we have the Iowa caucus irregularities. The Des Moines Register editorial board was so disgusted with the irregularities that they witnessed with their own eyes, and the Democratic establishment's refusal to respond to them transparently that it penned an editorial entitled "Something Smells in the Democratic Party." It notes that the whole process produced a whiff of impropriety and said that the party response reeks of autocracy. Then we go on to the Nevada caucus irregularities. In Nevada, Senator Harry Reid would not have been able to help control the processes of caucuses and conventions if he had publicly endorsed Hillary Clinton. Instead, Reid maintained neutrality while reportedly moving to convince casino bosses to get their workers to the caucuses for Clinton, which they were not planning to do, according to USA Today. Troubling reports say casino management selectively chose who could have time off to caucus, then watched to see how their employees voted, turning an expected tight race in 6 casino locations to a big win for Clinton. Again, this is just a small look into what was going on in Nevada and Iowa. So many irregularities were going on. The Democratic National Committee worked against Senator Sanders' campaign, colluded with media outlets to smear him. 538's Harry Enton predicted, quite frankly, in June 2015 that if Bernie Sanders did well in Iowa and New Hampshire, you'd likely see the Democratic establishment rush in to try to squash Sanders, much as Republicans did to Newt Gingrich in 2012 after he won South Carolina. The use of superdelegates in the mainstream media played a large role. Debbie Wasserman Schultz boldly admitted, in response to Jake Tapper of CNN's question about a rigged process, that the superdelegate system is designed to keep party stalwarts from running against grassroots activists like Sanders. Enton's boss, Nate Silver, went so far as to write that Donald Trump would be easy to stop under Democratic rules, in part because superdelegates play a substantial role. Major media followed the Associated Press in consistently including superdelegates in the count, starting with Sanders' big win in New Hampshire. And metadata appears to show that the AP colluded with the Clinton campaign to announce her as winner the day before the last Tuesday's vote, with nearly 700 delegates at stake, largely based on polls of superdelegates which did not vote until the Democratic National Convention. The most damning evidence of top DNC officials worked against the Sanders campaign came in the form of a leaked DNC email archive published by website WikiLeaks on July 22nd, 2016. In addition to depicting a general culture of contempt for the Sanders campaign, the email showed DNC officials colluding with journalists with corporate media outlets to marginalize and in some cases smear Sanders himself by planting stories. So this is getting into the larger extent of the collusion, but we really want to focus on how these people who control the election system, to see what else they're doing just baldly. I mean, we see that they stole the votes. We see that they rigged the machines and flipped the votes and completely tampered with the voting machines because they control the voting machines, and we have no transparency into any of these numbers, and it's this entire election needs to be thrown out just on that. But when you also then look at the exit polling and all of the, just astronomically, the odds are of any of this happening, as if the state's going for Sanders by 80%, then will flip to Clinton. That's bizarre, and it's ridiculous to believe that. And to dismiss this evidence of the voting machines and the states being flipped is just ridiculous for the Young Turks and Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski and everyone else in the media who claims to support Bernie Sanders. Of course, MSNBC is going to run stories about how, Bernie Sanders says it's not rigged, so if Bernie Sanders says it's not rigged, then la-di-da. I want to bring up that terrible article from MSNBC, as if sellout Bernie Sanders is any authority on election fraud. But no, we look at Bev Harris, we look at Election Justice USA, and we look at all of the cases of all the lawsuits of people taking political action against us. We have legal action taken by other parties in Arizona, New York, Illinois, California, and so many others, and so much more evidence in all of these different states. It's just ridiculous to think that this wasn't orchestrated by Clinton and that this didn't help Clinton, when we have the evidence that it does. So now we want to go more into more of the information on the flipped states. If you'll just bear with me for a second. So here we go. We have evidence for fraud or suppression in each primary phase, state by state. We don't want to go through all the states, but let's just give their election justices introduction to the information. In the present section, we provide a full date-by-date, state-by-state breakdown of evidence for election fraud, voter suppression, or other irregularities documented throughout the course of the 2016 primaries. Based on this work, Election Justice USA has established an upper estimate of 184 pledged delegates lost by Senator Bernie Sanders as a consequence of specific irregularities and instances of fraud. Adding these delegates to Senator Sanders' pledged delegate total and subtracting the same number from Hillary Clinton's total would more than erase the 359 pledged delegate gap between the two candidates. Election Justice established the upper estimate through exit polling data, statistical analysis by precinct size, and attention to the details of Democratic proportional awarding of national delegates. Even small changes in vote shares in critical states like Massachusetts and New York could have substantially changed the media narrative surrounding the primaries in ways that would likely have had far-reaching consequences for Senator Sanders' campaign. In what follows, we would summarize the evidence on a state-by-state, date-by-date basis. Each state is introduced, followed by the minimum and maximum estimate of delegates. So we have direct voter suppression, registration tampering, illegal voter registration purges, inaccurate voting machine counts, and then the different miscellaneous forms of fraud. And so let's look at all of the states that we have some form of tampering by way of Clinton. We have Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, uh, and those were the early states where we had four of the most important states: Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. And remember, we just said that the people in the media were talking about how they needed to crush Bernie Sanders in Iowa and New Hampshire, and through the different cases, he. So let's just look at New Hampshire. On February 9th, Sanders won a convincing victory over Clinton in New Hampshire's Democratic primary. When including Martin O'Malley, this win represented a 4.2 improvement for Sanders over the initial full exit poll projection. According to this predictor, Hillsborough County, New Hampshire's largest, ought to show no irregularities. A column chart, however, of Hillsborough shows a smooth and dramatic increase for Clinton, closing the gap between her and Sanders by 29.8% from the smallest to the largest township awarded. Examining the income levels and racial demographics of townships in Hillsborough, giving us no insight that would suggest such an unexpected increase for Clinton. Given smaller size of New Hampshire, though, Sanders' already sizable win, and given the way Dems proportionally counting works, election justice has calculated that Sanders could have won the additional 8,000 or so votes it would take to keep Hillsborough from showing an irregular precinct vote result without it affecting the overall delegate count. If, however, the same irregular results are present statewide and a reasonable explanation could be given for why the exit poll missed a margin substantially outside the sample size alone margin of error, Sanders may have picked up as many as 3 additional national delegates, with Clinton losing the same. Because of the discrepancy between the vote share by precinct size analysis and the exit poll, Election Justice USA has not shifted any national delegates to Sanders in our lower estimate of national delegate count. Given Clinton's unexpected big win there in 2008, New Hampshire remains fertile ground for further study of the vote share increase by precinct size pattern for particular candidates. So here we have just the even though Clinton lost, the number of votes she got did not match any of the confirmed data, and because of that unexpected bump that she never got, which she obtained illegally, she won more delegates over Sanders. And this delegate bullshit is the real thing that lost Bernie Sanders the presidency. But, just so much... I guess we'll look at Nevada because so much went on there. So continuing with one of the earlier states, Nevada. The Nevada Democratic Caucus saw Senator Harry Reid... Alright, so we read this part. Election justice read complaints about irregularities ahead of and at the state convention that saw so much vitriol and false claims of violence by Sanders delegates and supporters. While we do not think it can be established to any degree of certainty that the Democratic establishment antics ahead and during the convention were responsible for the lost national delegates for Bernie Sanders, an unconfirmed registration tampering report on social media report fits a pattern seen in several other states. According to the report, at least one of the delegates refused entry to the Nevada Democratic Convention, was deemed not to be a Democrat after his registration was switched without the knowledge or consent. Election Justice USA, primarily on the basis of Ralston's analysis, estimates that Bernie Sanders would have picked up an additional 1 to 4 national delegates if Reid had not put his thumb on the scales. So yeah, Nevada, they were talking about how Harry Reid kind of, and this was just the manufactured violence and the tipping of the scales, and how the voting places were really controlled by Reid, and how people were being manipulated by the casino bosses. And so the early states were Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, which South Carolina, let's read South Carolina. Writing The Nation, Joshua Holland has suggested that it makes no sense that Clinton would cheat in a contest she was clearly winning already. Besides massively begging the question and ignoring the historical example of Watergate and Richard Nixon, the argument ignores the contours of the primary calendar, and when those arguing for rigging that benefited Clinton believe it began. Heading into the February 27th vote, the pledged delegates count between Hillary and Bernie was an extremely close 51 to 50. Sanders' virtual tie in Iowa, large victory in New Hampshire, and close running in Nevada put the Democratic establishment on notice that Sanders could be competitive for the long haul. South Carolina was the Democratic primary to definitively turn the inaccurate machine count that hat trick. The first full exit poll missed by more than 10%. Voting machines in South Carolina are extremely hackable. Voting results by precinct in Richland, South Carolina's largest county, are noticeably irregular, and they have a graph of the exit polling and the I don't know. The graph says Theodore Soares, a co-author of this report, has calculated that the sample size only margin of error for South Carolina at 5%, while the initial full exit poll missed by 15.3% in Clinton's favor. Jesus. Edison Research projected a 37.2 win for Clinton, very close to 538's polls, plus projection of a 38.3 win for Clinton. The result, however, shows a 47.5 win for Clinton, a 10.2 miss, more than double than expected margin of error. Notably, Edison's initial projection did not miss outside the margin of error for black voters, as one would expect if misreading black preference for Clinton were responsible for the increased share of the vote by precinct size increase in the scatter plot chart above. Instead, Edison's initial projection of substantial win with white voters gave way to the adjusted exit poll margin that favored Clinton with white voters. Since the exit poll missed a large margin with white voters, most Democratic voters in Richland County are black, and racially polarizing Mecklenburg County in South Carolina, neighboring state directly to the north, does not show the pattern. The burden of proof now lies that Clinton supporters for a non-fraudulent explanation of the irregular increase in the share of votes as precinct increased. For the small 20%, so we see, and we go, based on Election Justice USA, calculates based on initial exit polling projections, vote percentage, and the change in the smallest versus largest precincts, in comparison to Democratic proportional assignment of delegates is viewable as the green paper blocks. That inaccurate machine counts likely cost Bernie Sanders at least 2 more national delegates and perhaps as many as 4 in South Carolina, with Clinton having a corresponding number of fewer delegates. So the phony percentage numbers led to, and Clinton might have won South Carolina, but the phony percentage numbers show us that Bernie Sanders was cheated out of delegates, and that the exit polling of the accurate exit polling of how these states were supposed to go were off by 15%. Yeah, so this is nonsense. Our election system is completely fraudulent when there are discrepancies of this great gap. So now we move on to Super Tuesday, where we have evidence of fraud in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. So, and that was a big time for Sanders. And then we move on to March 2nd through March 15th. We have fraud in Louisiana, Mississippi, Illinois, which was a big one, Missouri, and Ohio. So let's and Arizona, New York. So we have evidence for it in New York, Arizona, Ohio. So let's read some of the Arizona information. Arizona is the one primary state out of the 36 for which Election Justice USA could not obtain precinct level results for its largest county, Maricopa. An executive assistant for Maricopa County recorder Helen Purcell stated that they were no longer keeping track of precinct level votes after dramatically slashing the number of polling stations as discussed. Yeah, direct voter suppression in the form of closed polling stations, lack of precinct level results, and no exit polling make it difficult to estimate the impact of election fraud on the delicate totals for Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, but it is clear that registration tampering happened on a previously unseen scale. So this is what we call collusion, folks. When the voting information is this fraudulent, but on top of that, we have polling places closed, exit polling canceled, the resources for learning about election fraud. This is called collusion when our voting system is taken from us, and the rest of the systems we have put in place to make sure that our election system can't be hacked. Sorry, that was my hands. I didn't fart. I made a fart sound with my hands like that, but like that. But we it's collusion when there's just so many forces at work for Clinton against Bernie Sanders. Election Justice USA reviewed each individual record in a 151-person database collected and published by Online Collective Anonymous. The beginning of Election Justice saw one of our current board members independently collecting a database of more than 50 registration tampering complaints, very few of which were found to overlap with the anonymous database. Our analysis of each entry in the anonymous database and the early Election Justice USA database confirms that the primary target for registration switched without knowledge or contest of the intended voter overwhelmingly affected supporters of Bernie Sanders. Anonymous found that the registration switching affected the following. So just so much. These numbers are highly consistent with our analysis. So of course, all of the flipping and all of the registration changing, tampering, is all affecting Bernie Sanders and not Hillary Clinton. While Southwest Voter Education Registration Project's Antonio Gonzalez thinks the major issue in Arizona was voter suppression, consciously or unconsciously, by Republican state officials, he's very clear about what the remedy should be. In my view, the Arizona primary, the Democratic primary, the Republican primary should be thrown out, and a new election should be held. According to Gonzalez, the suppression of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Arizona voters was a violation of the Voting Rights Act, as it had a disproportionate effect on Latino voters. Typically, Latino voters vote more heavily on Election Day, rather than in earlier absentee balloting. 7% of Latino voters in the state are in Maricopa County, according to Gonzalez, and the Democratic and Republican parties should not seat delegates from Arizona. Those delegates should be thrown out, and awarded delegates based on a fraudulent vote should not be allowed. Either that, delegations should be disqualified in total at the party convention, or you have to have a new election. So this guy is smart. It's clear through all the evidence I've shown, all the compiled evidence that benefited Clinton and hurt Bernie Sanders, that this was a fraudulent election and should never have been seen as illegitimate. And at the Democratic convention, the vote should have been thrown out, and there should have been some sort of new vote. But of course, now we have Donald Trump as the president. So those were states in March, and then New York, and then we go on to April 26th. We have tampering in Maryland, and then May we have tampering in Indiana and Kentucky. June we go on to Puerto Rico, where there was tampering, and then of course California, which I'm going to go talk about in detail, and then Jersey, and then of course the states we have further tampering. Massachusetts, you could talk about Massachusetts all day, and then Texas, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Washington. So let's go back to the actual voting tampering in California that was recorded. So let's read a little bit of this. On May 31st, the Wall Street Journal published a piece entitled "Clinton Might Not Be the Nominee. A Sanders Sanders win in California would turbocharge the mounting Democratic unease about her viability." While the most commenters disagreed, it was a legitimate argument that appears to have precipitated the small, full-scale efforts to suppress votes from Sanders supporters and electronically manipulate voting on an individual scale. A previous section of this report detailed the 6 different ways California election officials engaged in voter suppression, targeting targeting no party preference voters. Our online complaint form saw testimony affidavits from over 700 California voters who experienced voting and registration problems. Of these respondents, 84 were switched to another party without their knowledge or consent. In some cases, these charges were backdated, such as they were listed as made before initially registered. We have testimony from California voters who were given provisional ballots by poll workers despite their names being on the Democratic voter rolls. We have testimony from California Democratic voters who received the wrong ballot type in the mail. We have the testimony video evidence from California Democratic voters who were given provisional ballots instead of being directed to a recently changed polling location. We have testimony from poll inspectors about a shortage of ballots. In some cases, fewer than 39% of registered voters would have been covered by the amount of ballots provided for Los Angeles County precincts, despite a California state law requiring that 75% coverage be guaranteed. We also have the testimony from voters who were forced to use provisional ballots due to ballot shortages. We have testimony from poll workers did not count or keep a roster of provisional ballots in California, hence no chain of custody is possible. And then we go on to Alan Rifkin is one voter we spoke with, a specific recommendation poll worker. Mr. Rifkin provided us with several forms of proof that he had been registered as a Democrat and was sent to a specific polling place where he arrived. However, his name was not on the voter poll. Meanwhile, a well-controlled California early exit poll consisting of 21,000 data points matched early return for down ballots but showed a discrepancy with unverified machine results, to Clinton's benefit, of course, by an average of 14%, as much as 22% across these significantly, Capital Weekly obtained weekly data directly from each California county that gave them the ability to control nearly perfectly for race, gender, age, geography, and political party. For state-level races, the exit poll provided highly accurate, even though Capital Weekly noted in correspondence with an author of the report that down-ballot races were only weighed by age rather than the demographic factors the way the presidential race was weighted. Capital Weekly released 2 versions of the poll, the first showing a 12% lead for Clinton, with 69% of early vote by mail voters age 55 or older. Counties in California publicly announced verifying cutoff dates and times for early vote by mail returns. Ballots received before that cutoff were counted and announced at 8 p.m. on election night when polls closed. All those ballots received after the cutoff time were counted in the month after the election, when the huge number of provisional ballots were also counted. Capital Weekly's later version of its vote-by-mail exit poll showed movement toward Sanders with 10% lead for Clinton and a greater number of younger voters. Election Justice USA was able to obtain early vote-by-mail numbers by precinct from several large counties, including Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. All 3 counties show our irregular pattern of increased vote by percentage for Clinton as precinct size increased. In Los Angeles, the largest election county in the United States, New York is divided into 5 different boroughs or counties. The pattern shows for election day voting as well. Clinton saw a 29% increase in difference between her and Sanders in Los Angeles, from smallest to largest precinct sizes from election day voting in Los Angeles County, and the massive 39.4 increase from the same in early voted precincts levels. level totals. In Orange County, the sixth largest in the United States, Clinton improved over Sanders by 9.4% from smallest to largest precinct size on election day. That alone would qualify for showing the pattern weekly or uncertainty, with our 10% cutoff for definitely showing the pattern. Early vote by mail balloting in Orange County, however, bumps into the certainly showing category with a 15.4 difference in the gap between Clinton and Sanders, favoring Clinton. San Diego County, the fifth largest in the U.S. by population, likewise shows the pattern definitively in early vote by mail ballots, with an 18.2 improvement in Clinton's advantage over Sanders from smallest to largest precincts. Election day totals in San Diego fall further down the 5 to 10% uncertain range for diagnosing existence of the pattern, with a 6.8 improvement on the difference for Clinton from smallest to largest precincts. While full analysis of all California's counties will have to be undertaken at a later date, irregularity in precinct level voting patterns is not limited to Southern California. Nicholas Bauer recently discovered one of the most striking patterns of all in Berkeley, California, and some surrounding cities. Bauer excluded the UC Berkeley campus, and the wild pattern appears upon analyzing vote totals compared to the number of registrants in a particular city rather than strictly on precinct voting on election day. All told, the strategy pushback against a possible Sanders victory that could make superdelegates skittish about Clinton seem to have proceeded along two specific fronts. A massive effort to rig early vote-by-mail balloting has evidenced the discrepant exit polling and consistently large differences between small precincts and large precincts in early vote-by-mail balloting in California. In California's three largest counties. A huge number of tampered registrations, especially voting people to permanent vote-by-mail status, in a way that led to huge numbers of provisional ballots, so that even if pro-Sanders ballots were cast, they were not counted and included in election night totals. Okay, so we see in California that, one, they were lying about the initial exit polling, and two, that they threw away a lot of the pro-Sanders ballots. And so this is a pattern that was going on all throughout the country, all just constantly. So I'm not sure how many states they're projecting all this for, but California is definitely one of the big ones that people were most upset about. California was so blatantly stolen, not just through media collusion and the bullshit that the Young Turks talks about and the secular talks about, but through the very corrupt voting system we have. And if anyone is arguing for not reforming our voting system, they are, especially the Justice Democrats, if anyone who's trying to reform the Democratic Party but not looking at election fraud and not making election fraud as big as a topic as money in politics, then that group of people is dangerous. And we really need our people's movement so we can have a democracy, so we can get all this information out there and to form our opinions, not based on what patriarchal Cenk Uygur or Kyle Kuczynski say, but what the facts say and what the will of the people say. So we have, let me just read their conclusion. We have aimed to provide an overview of the evidence for various types of fraud and targeted voter suppression impacting the outcomes of the 2016 Democratic presidential primary. After covering the legal background and the history of Election Justice USA legal actions, our best efforts to combat election fraud and voter suppression, we gave a thorough treatment of targeted voter suppression, registration tampering, illegal voter purging, exit polling discrepancies, evidence for voting machine tampering, and the security or lack thereof of various voting machine types. Finally, we have given a date-by-date, state-by-state overview of each of these fraud or suppression types at work throughout the course of the 2016 Democratic primary. So, and they call for, we conclude by calling for decertification of the 2016 Democratic primary results in every state in which we establish a reasonable doubt of to the accuracy of the vote tally. Finally, we wish to bring the reader's attention to three simple reforms that would eliminate the mere possibility of the vast majority of fraud types demonstrated or evidence in this report. Exclusive use of hand-counted paper ballots in all future U.S. elections. Automated voter registration with the same-day party affiliation switching as a mandatory condition for all elections that we publicly funded. Restoration of voting rights legislation which would ensure adequate access to polling sites. Yeah, so they're absolutely right with this. We need automatic voter registration day of. We need voting rights, and we need, for the time being, hand-counted ballots because the electronic is completely fraudulent. So here's the evidence at Election Justice USA. Go to their website, electionjusticeusa.org. You can look at all of the evidence, but the point of this video is that we need to take election fraud seriously, and we need to move from a place of truth. So hopefully I've shed a small light on the problem of election fraud and voting tally fraud. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we continue this conversation and this discussion. I'm Sandy Frank, and thanks for listening.